In the first two videos of this series, we looked at how India opened its space sector to various private companies and how the startups like Skyroot, Agnikul, Pixel, and many more are building everything from rockets and satellites to space-based technologies. But building space industry is not the end goal. The bigger question is, where is India planning to go from here? India has had major milestones in space, from sending Mangalyaan to Mars and successfully launching Chandrayaan 3 on the moon and studying sun through Aditya L1. But the India's next challenge is going to be bigger. Over the next 15 years, the country wants to send astronauts to space, build its own space station, bring lunar samples back to the Earth, and eventually put an Indian astronaut on the moon. At the same time, India wants to increase and grow its space economy from $8.4 billion today to $44 billion by 2033. So, is India simply aiming for successful missions, or is it trying to build itself into a major global space power by 2040? Let's look at the bigger picture. The first major step in this roadmap is Gaganyaan, India's human space flight program. The mission is currently progressing through its testing and qualification phase, with India targeting its first crewed space flight in 2026. But Gaganyaan is not the end goal, it is a foundation for what comes next. India is already planning Chandrayaan 4, which aims to bring lunar samples back to Earth, a much more complex mission than simply landing on the moon. And the bigger ambition is the Bharatiya Antariksha Station, or BAS. India plans to establish its own space station in low Earth orbit by 2035, creating a platform for long duration human missions and scientific research. In the long run, these capabilities are expected to support India's goal of sending an Indian astronaut to the moon by 2040. So, India is not planning isolated missions anymore, it is building a long term capability step by step. Of course, a roadmap like this requires serious investment, and India's space budget reflects the growing commitment. The annual space budget has nearly tripled from around 5,615 crore rupees in 2013 and 14 to over 13,700 crores now. That money supports more complex missions, infrastructure, and technologies needed for projects such as Gaganyaan and Bharatiya Antariksha Station. But there is another important shift. The government is not relying only on public spending. The 1,000 crore rupees venture capital fund, technology transfers, and policy reforms are bringing private capital and companies into the sector. This combination is important because building a strong space industry requires both government investment in long term capabilities and private investment in commercial innovation. And that brings us to the economic opportunity. India's space opportunity is not just about rockets. Today, the country's space economy is estimated at around $8.4 billion, accounting for roughly 2% of the global market. The target is to reach $44 billion by 2033 and capture around 8 to 10% of the global space market by 2035. Where will this growth come from? Satellite manufacturing, communication, Earth observation, navigation, defense, and increasingly the data and services built around satellite technology. This is why the private space ecosystem we discussed in the previous videos is so important. India's goal is not just to launch more rockets, it is to build businesses around the entire space value chain. There is another dimension to India's space strategy: security. Satellites are now critical for communication, navigation, surveillance, and defense. In 2019, through Mission Shakti, India demonstrated its anti satellite capability. It successfully demonstrated the capability to destroy a satellite in low Earth orbit using an interceptor missile. Organizations such as DRDO and the Defense Space Agency are working to strengthen India's ability to protect its satellites, monitor activities in space, and respond to emerging threats. So, India's space program is expanding in three directions: scientific exploration, commercial opportunity, and national security. And these three areas are increasingly interconnected. India has several advantages. It has decades of ISRO experience, a growing private space industry, increasing government investment, and a clear long term roadmap. But becoming a major global space power won't be easy. The US and China are investing heavily in reusable rockets, satellite constellations, deep space exploration, and commercial technologies. India will need sustained investment in R&D, stronger manufacturing capabilities, more private innovation, and a globally competitive supply chain. So I wouldn't say India is guaranteed to become a space superpower, but the foundations are being built. The question is whether India can turn its scientific capabilities and the growing private sector into a globally competitive space industry. And the next 10 to 15 years could determine the answer. What do you think? Can India become a global space power by 2040? Do watch my previous two videos on Indian space sector where I have covered how India opened its space sector to private companies and how the private space startups are taking off and becoming a complete commercial ecosystem around ISRO. I hope you find them interesting and thanks for watching.